Hey guys, working on the truck again. This time trying to figure out why I didn't have 12 volts at the cigarette lighter adapter. This isn't the one on the truck, this is just one I have. But I couldn't figure out why the 12 volt cigarette lighter adapter didn't work. Without the TMs, it's really hard to track all this stuff down, but I found the 12 volt converter box, and it's located up here. It's hard to get in there, but it's right up here where these wires would have connected. So when I found it, it had a blown 10 amp fuse. So this sits in the truck against that firewall like that. And there's the fuse receiver right there. Put a fuse in it. The fuse arced when I first put it in, so I pulled it out just because I was nervous, but ended up just being, I think it's just charging these capacitors. Anyway, put the 10 amp fuse in it, and nothing. Actually, that's not true. When I checked the voltage at the cigarette lighter adapter, I had 24 volts. So this thing, let me sit down. This thing's completely fried. You can see back there, it got hot, which is crazy because this is a huge heat sink for just a small voltage converter, but this thing's corroded and nasty and fried. So I wish it would fail to 0 volts instead of 24, because if you had sensitive electronics plugged in, you'd be in bad shape. But anyway, I popped this connector off. This has a back cover on it that I just threw away. Tried to source these. They're made in France. They're crazy expensive. And anyway, so there's the connector. I cut. It's just 4 wires. It's 2 grounds, 24 in and 12 out. So I thought, well, I'll just try one of these cheapy Chinese ones. These are super cheap. It's actually rated at more output watts, I guess, than the original. So here's the wires if you need to know. On this plug, this has a diagram on the back on that sheet metal backing, but anyway, wire 1860 is the 24 volt positive, the 1088 is the 12 volt positive going out. There's 2 1435E wires, and those are just both ground. So I don't think it matters which way you put those together, but so then I just fabbed up this super simple bracket. Here's the interesting part. This, as long as your main battery switch behind the cab is on, this is live. This gets voltage and it sends out 12 volt. So no wonder it fried. If it's on for, months at a time, that's going to get hot. Even if it's not converting any voltage, it's still doing something. So I quickly soldered in this inline fuse, and what I'm going to do is, I've got my dash all pulled apart, but what I'm going to do is mount that box in the same location, solder to these wires. I got the battery switch off, otherwise these will arc. Because like I said, it's hot the whole time. It's not keyed on or anything. It's just hot all the time. So, anyway, tracing wires back here, found everything. My cigarette lighter adapter was completely rusted, so I put in this marine one. What I'm going to do is probably somewhere over here install just a quick toggle switch or something, or a rocker switch to turn this on, because I don't want that converter on 24 hours a day. So that's the project we're working on right now. I'm going to solder all this in off camera and we'll see if it works. All right, we're back. It's actually the next day. I had to go do some other stuff, but got these all soldered together. They're not all black tactical like the factory, but at least you can identify what is what. Let me back up here. I left the fuse holder long because, again, at some point, for right now, I'm just going to pull the fuse in and out when I need to use the cigarette lighter adapter. Eventually what I'll do is I'll cut this here, run a wire all the way over there to that switch to turn it on. Because like I said, something tells me if the military grade France one burned up, that this little cheapy Chinese one, which is a quarter of the size of the heatsink, will burn up as well. So, and hey, look at that, my fancy little bracket. That was how I was holding everything when I was soldering it. So these all have double heat shrink. There's a short piece in there just covering the solder joint, and then a larger one covering everything. And this heat shrink has kind of the glue on the middle, so it keeps it all watertight. So let's see, I've got a 10 amp fuse in there. We'll turn the battery switch on and see what happens. Alright, no sparking, so that's good. Hey, look at that. 12.3, so that's good. So this is just a USB adapter that has 2 ports on it. So yeah, I think I'll mount, I don't know, I'll figure something out. I'll mount a little rocker switch here or something to be able to turn that on. In the meantime, it seems like we're live. You know what I might do? I might leave this on for an hour or so. I'll check with an infrared thermometer. I'll check this temperature. Just see if it raises with it pulling no draw. And then be hard to see in the... you're not going to be able to see this, huh? Dang, that sucks. This camera doesn't pick up any no light. So anyway, it's just going to sit up there like that, smaller than the factory one. Actually, you know what, I'll turn it so the wires go up. Tuck those away, and eventually I'll cut that off and run my extra wire. So anyway, I hope this helps someone. There are fuses hidden all over this truck. You know, if you go up under the engine compartment, there's a bunch of fuse holders. If you pull your CTIS panel out, there's basically what you think is a fuse holder here. It's just a diode. There's 2 of those back there, so it's difficult to find all this stuff. But anyway, hope that helps someone. All right, I wasn't going to post this, but I got a couple tips I'm going to show you. Anyway, that's all mounted up there. Looks pretty good. A little ghetto with the fuse holder hanging down, but that's what I'm going to use for now until I kind of get around to redoing a lot of this dash. So it's working good. It's been on for probably an hour, and there's no real heat. I mean, I'm not pulling any load on the cigarette lighter adapter except for that little USB adapter. So anyway, that's that. 2 tips I wanted to share. The solder I'm using is real thin, but this is rosin core. This is not a how-to solder video, but the center of this solder has rosin in it, the flux. And if you've ever sweat copper like pipes, you know you've got to flux it, otherwise the solder won't stick. So these wires that were up here that go into the harness were super corroded, and obviously the solder won't stick to it. So this is a tip, is you can buy the rosin in a little can. It's pretty cheap, and this is a lifetime supply. I've had this for probably about a year now. And you just get your wire hot and dip it in there, or just kind of paint it on. You can put your finger on it and get some on there. Anyway, what it'll do as soon as it heats up and melts into the copper wire is it will clean it, and then your solder just flows like butter. So there's that tip. I think well anyway, then I'm just using this ancient solder gun. I think everyone's owned one of these at one point. My dad gave this to me years ago. He also taught me a good tip. These tips are replaceable. They're copper, solid copper, and you can barely see that. See, it's like not really a half moon, but kind of a circle shape. Is what that'll do is, I can't do this with one hand, but it will kind of cradle the wire a little bit better, and some of the heat will transfer a little bit better into, you can kind of see it in there. You just take a round file and file that in, and that way it'll kind of gently caress your wire and allow more heat to transfer into it. So anyway, hope that little tip helps.